When talking about Doom console ports, there's plenty of places one can start. Doom has seen many releases across many platforms over the years, releasing on a variety of systems under a number of interesting circumstances. From the Sega 32X version all the way up to the 3DO version, Doom is no stranger to intriguing and sometimes bizarre conversions. Yet there's one console release from the 1990s that has eternally fascinated me, not because it's the most popular console port, nor because it's the most technically gifted, it's the sheer fact that it exists at all that intrigues me. To talk about this console port, we have to turn our attention to the PlayStation 1 console. You see, Doom was released on PlayStation 1 in 1995. That version of the game came bundled with Doom 1 and Doom 2, squeezing these games into an impressive package that allowed console gamers to experience the majority of these two iconic games. These ports went above and beyond other console releases, adding in custom lighting, new music, and even mixing up enemy placements. It's a version of the game that has developed a cult following and is still held up by many gamers in the modern times. The game sold well enough that it even made it onto PlayStation Classics Collection, indicating that it sold at least 500,000 copies on PlayStation 1. What some people may not be aware of though, is that this wasn't the only Doom released onto PlayStation 1. In 1996, PS1 Doom would get a follow-up release, Final Doom. Yes, Final Doom made its way to consoles, and it made its way to PlayStation 1. There's a number of things that mark this release out as interesting. Chief among them is the fact that this was the first time Final Doom had been released onto any console. Even more impressive is the fact that this version brings over many of the crowd-pleasing features from its predecessor. Coloured lighting is present and correct. The soundtrack is composed by Aubrey Hodges, adding new tracks as well as mixing in some older ones. There's full options for multi-system multiplayer and cooperative play. The game also adds in support for Sony's official PlayStation Mouse add-on, allowing gamers to attempt to recreate the PC experience on the home console. For PlayStation 1 gamers who are craving more Doom action, this was the perfect answer to that. But is it actually any good? It still suffers from the same issues that plagued the original Doom on PS1. One area where things are more dicey is in the framerate department. Unfortunately, this is a combination of poor optimization and the PS1 hardware simply not being up to the task. It's more noteworthy in some of the Plutonia and TNT levels, where it's clear that the levels are simply too big for the PlayStation version of the game. The level frame rate just completely drops, and the game becomes almost unplayable at points. It can make some of the larger firefights feel entirely unfair, because you'll be dashing around at 10 frames a second, hoping that you can get out of the firefights. To combat this, some of the levels have been altered and some of the enemies have been removed, but what this leaves is a few levels where the enemy count is lowered and it's just not as fun as it should be. This is one of those cases where Williams were damned if they did and damned if they didn't. It also goes some way to explaining probably the other big gripe I have with Final Doom on PS1, namely the level selection. You see, this compilation only has 30 levels across the 3 episodes. Yes, 3 episodes. 13 are pulled from the master levels, 11 are pulled from TNT, and only 6 make the jump from Plutonia. What this means is that if you came in expecting to play a lot of the Final Doom levels from TNT and Plutonia, you're actually going to be mightily disappointed with the offering here. Things aren't also helped by the fact that some of the levels chosen are just not that good in my opinion. Master levels for me are not a great set of levels across the board. There's a few gems in there, but a lot of the levels that make their way here feel a bit sluggish and they're not really that fun. This hurts even more when you look at the exclusive levels that Williams designed for the PS1 version of Doom and Doom 2. Some of those levels are genuinely great and stand among the best Doom levels that you can play, so I'm genuinely surprised that they didn't add in a few special levels here for gamers to try and bring the quality up. There's very little rhyme or reason to the levels that come in from TNT and Plutonia. You start off with System Control and Human Barbecue in TNT, but from there you'll be jumping to Wormhole, Crater, Nukage Processing, Deepest Reaches, Processing Area, all the way to Heck, which in my opinion is the best level in this whole game. But then you'll try the Plutonia levels, and there's only 6 of them that actually make the cut, and they're all from the first third of that game. So what you'll find is that a lot of the better levels simply aren't near this version of the game, which is really disappointing. At the end of the day though, it's still a very enjoyable overall package, even if some of the levels do let it down. The fact that this even exists at all is testament to the fact that Doom did sell successfully on consoles, and the fact that many players got to experience these levels in some form, even if they didn't own a PC, is pretty great in my opinion. Was this the best way to experience TNT and Plutonia? Definitely not. Should they have called this Final Doom? I don't think so, but ultimately it doesn't matter. This was a very interesting footnote in the console versions of Doom and rarely gets discussed because there are much more notable and less impressive versions of Doom that take the spotlight. At some point I do plan to come back and I do plan to do a full retrospective of Final Doom on PlayStation 1 because I do think it's worth the time and effort to seek this out and experience it, even if you didn't have a PlayStation 1 back in the day, because it's fun to see how these levels were interpreted for a new platform, when others at the time simply weren't willing to give it a chance. Do let me know what your opinions of Final Doom on the PlayStation 1 are.